Right, everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to the fourth and final seminar of the day. We are talking about sucklers without subsidy. So the aim of this session is for us to focus on what you as farmers can physically control, what's in your control, rather than having a big discussion about what we can't control. So I'd just like to thank our three guests for joining us. I've got Claire Beaumont sat in the middle. Claire is from Gowbarrow farm in Cumbria, one of the most beautiful farms I've ever had the pleasure to visit, right on the edge of Ullswater. We've got Ruari Martin on the end, who is estate manager for Castletown Estates. And we've got Andrew Robinson at this side from Armstrong Watson, and also has a few cows as well, don't you? So coming from two angles today. So we're just going to start off by playing a quick video. I just wanted to give you all a bit of an insight as to where these people are farming and what they're farming, and then I'm going to ask them all just to fill you in themselves and just explain a little bit more. So play the video. Thank you. Okay, that was a lovely video, wasn't it? Let's hear a little bit more then from you guys about what you're farming, how you're farming. Rory, can we start with you? Just give us a bit of information.
So hello everyone, I'm Rory Martin. I'm the Farms Director at Castletown Estate up at Carlisle. We are a large, diversified land management business with significant in-hand farming operations. So we're calving about 180 suckler cows, and then we're fortunate enough to farm on a large salt marsh, so we've usually about 1,000 head of cattle on the marsh every year, and then we'll finish in probably 1,200 head a year across two sites. We're contract farming up at Lockerbie now as well. Alongside that, my day job's kept busy with rental properties, wedding business, various environmental schemes and other bits and pieces. So farming and land management is what we do effectively.
Brilliant, thank you. I've just been told to speak into this, so I'm going to take it off because then I can hold it. Right, Claire, tell us about yourself and your beautiful farm that we've just seen.
Hi there. My farm, it's on the shores of Ullswater. It's about 385 acres of permanent pasture. I farm with my husband Sam, and I'm in partnership with my parents. We've got, our main enterprises are really the shorthorn cattle. We've got a herd that it's about 55 at the moment. It goes up to 70, I think this summer was 75 head of cattle. We finish everything. We're Pasture for Life certified. We've got everything outwintered. We sell everything direct. We've also got a small number of fell ponies and cooney pigs as well, just to keep us entertained. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Oh, we're in our two main enterprises, the cattle and environmental stewardship. So we're in a higher tier, stewardship scheme.
Brilliant. Thanks, Claire. And then, Andrew, you've got two hats on.
Good afternoon. Yes, I have two hats on, and I'm not normally quiet. So, I'm Andrew Armstrong, born and bred on a large hill farm in northeast Cumbria near Beaucastle. But as I was growing up, I didn't like white woolly things called sheep. I always liked cattle, so I ran away and became an agricultural accountant, and now head of agriculture for Armstrong Watson Accountants across the north of England. So my full-time day job has been an accountant to solely farming businesses. Obviously, my parents retired because I'd run away, metaphorically. So I'm now in a loose joint venture with my best friend on a large suckler cow and beef farm. On the Roman Wall, we have the Roman Wall in our field near Hexham. We run 170 pure lean cows. Everything's finished and goes to Scot beef, dead weight. And we've got a lot of herbal layers, clovers, and we're just converting to organic status in the Organic Farmers and Growers scheme. So hopefully I've got two hats on.
Brilliant, definitely have. Right, so we've heard a lot today about the suckler industry and the dairy and beef industry. Now that's wound me up a little bit, as that, in my opinion, and it is just my opinion, it's one industry and we're the beef industry. And it's up to every family within that and every business within that industry to decide how they want to farm. And if suckler cows form a part of that, fair play. So let's go in feet first with the financials. From a financial standpoint, in your opinion, all three of you, where do suckler producers need to focus? What are the opportunities to make the suckler enterprise more financially viable? Andrew, I'm going to come to you first because you see, obviously from your own standpoint and from a lot of people that you work with, what are you seeing in those suckler businesses that are making money versus those ones that aren't?
Well, I might be quite controversial this afternoon, which I'm known for, but with my day job hat on, I think there's too many. The suckler cattle can be profitable, no doubt about it. But the issues we see from an accountant when you're looking through people's accounts is there's too much focus on the selling price and not the gross margin. We all would love to top the mark or whatever, but it's the gap that's left that matters. And the things that we see from a set of accounts, and I appreciate every farm is different, the costs that seem to run out of control in many systems are the ones that could be done. And you'll be no surprises here is feed costs, power and machinery and depreciation. You don't need a brand new shiny tractor to feed your suckler cows because the suckler cows have to pay for that shiny tractor. On our own system, the reason we went to lean cows after foot and mouth was of the 1,000 acres we farm, there's a good 500 of it on the windsill where the Roman Wall is, which is permanent pasture, can't be improved, we don't want to improve it, and it was decided on a type of suckler cow that could use the farm rather than spend lots of money adapting the farm to suit a different type of suckler cow. So I think you've got look at the costs and do what your farm can do rather than spend a lot of money doing what your farm can't do.
Controversial.
Said it would be.
But what if you like that breed, Andrew?
Well then, if you like that breed, you've got to try and find some way of making it profitable. And can't moan if it's not profitable, really, can you, if it's your choice? Because you've got control.
Can't moan, you do have control. Absolutely. Claire, talk us through what you think are the biggest opportunities for making a viable suckler system.
For us, Sam and I were farming sheep when we first moved, and we had a few cows, and we looked at the finances of all the different enterprises that we had and quickly saw that the cattle were going to make the most margin. But looking at the business overall, we saw that the quickest way to make a profit was to cut out your costs because they were just eating out all of our profits. So fertiliser and feed were the two really big costs, and they were costs that we can't control either. I think we kind of realised that we had to be in control of both the costs that our income and our outgoings, really, which is why we went for direct selling, because we then had more control over the prices that we're getting. It was something that we felt when we had sheep and selling them at the auction, had very little control as to what, it was what the prices were on the day. Whereas you feel like you can plan for your business ahead if you know what the prices are going to be, if you're able to dictate them.
Yeah, and we might as well just touch on that whilst you're talking about it. So direct sales is an area that a lot of suckler farmers, that we saw in the Farmers Weekly survey, see as an opportunity to add value. It's not just as easy, is it, as here's a cow, here's my customer, away you go.
It does take time, and we've built up a customer base. It comes down also a little bit to the fact that our cattle, the time that we spend looking after our cattle is quite minimal, as in, you were done by 10 at the latest a lot of the time. And then you've got your day to spend doing other stuff, like today, for example. And that's how you can build up your customer base. I mean, it's not for everyone. Not everyone likes doing it. We quite enjoy doing the face-to-face with people. We started just by talking to people in the village. And we also quite like having our own beef, so it's quite important for us to finish it and eat our own beef. So yeah, it's not for everyone, but for us who, we're relatively small, so we realise that, we can only finish a certain number of cattle a year. We have to maximise the income from each animal.
Yeah, but I mean, you're not on your own there, are you? The average herd size, suckler herd size across the country won't be a lot more than you're running, will it? So, yeah. Ruari, tell us your thoughts.
I could probably sum up everything I'm going to say as trying to fit a round peg in a square hole, or a square peg in a round hole, whichever way you want to think about it. So, two main things that I see all the time, and what we try not to do at Castletown, is try and make the farm fit how we want to farm it, rather than we need to farm the ground we've got, the area that we're fortunate enough to manage. And I'll say something potentially controversial as well. I have too many friends and know too many people that are trying to farm their farm in a way that doesn't suit it, and actually probably the best outcome for them, their business, their sanity, and the best outcome for the farm is, if you want to farm in that way, you like big continental cattle and you're on the side of a hill somewhere, instead of putting a shed up, putting them inside, trying to feed them, buying in feed, buying in straw, why don't you sell that farm and go and buy something that suits your mindset, your drive, your desire, what you want to do? And I understand that is potentially a fairly flippant thing to say, and there's loads of, we're all wedded to the land that we farm, but we very much view ourselves at Castletown not as farmers or foresters or conservationists or any of the other labels that get bandied about. We view ourselves as land managers, and one of the things we've done very deliberately now that subsidies are winding down and coming down to nothing by 2027 is take a step back and look at all of the land that we manage and say to ourselves, what's the right activity for the right reasons at the right time on this piece of ground? And it might be that there are other opportunities out there that will return a bigger margin per hectare on that piece of ground, which will bring in more revenue that we can then reinvest into the farming enterprise. So we've taken, quite happily hold my hands up and say it, we've taken quite a lot of ground out of production in a farming sense across the estate, put that into environmental schemes that are returning decent margins per hectare, but we're then taking that income for relatively little effort on what before we had to constantly ditch, drain, could only put spring crops in, not winter crops because it was waterlogged, etc., etc. Taking that money and reinvesting it into the core farming business. So we're now heavily invested in EID technology. We've got auto weighing, auto drafting systems. We're reducing the labour overhead on the cattle business so that we can turn out a much more profitable beast at the end of the day. on less acres with less time and bring in other revenue streams from other places so that the whole farm business is greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, okay. And you're unique to the panel, Ruari, in that you've got a suckler herd and a dairy oh, don't say that. I've just told everybody else off for saying that. A dairy cross animal enterprise. Just talk us through. You've done some. I know you've done some figures for us, and I'm not asking you to go through them all, but on those figures, margin per head was greater on your dairy cross animals. Not a huge amount, but it was. Just talk us through. I mean, the whole thing here. There's more value to suckler cows than just what's in your bank account.
Yeah. So you're right. We carve about 180 head of suckler cattle, and then historically we used to buy in between 1,000 and 1,500 head of sort of medium-sized stores, not yearlings. In the start of the year, as I mentioned, we're fortunate enough we manage a 2,500 acre salt marsh. So in the summer, all the cattle are out on the marsh. They're checked twice a day, and basically that's growing cheap frame for us. Frees up the more productive ground inland. We can grow a lot of forage crops on there. It's then easy to bring the cattle off the marsh, put them into the fattening sheds, use the homegrown feed and finish them. The big problem we had with that system is we were going out and buying cattle all at one time of year, i.e. sort of January through to May, summering them, then finishing them all at winter period. And you're very open to cattle price risk in that scenario. If we bought things when fat price was high and sold them when fat price was low, you can potentially lose a lot of money. And the mindset and the approach that we take lifts a lot from wider industry, but also from the sort of dairy, pig and poultry world. And we're interested in evidence-based decision making, so we weigh everything every month. We're recording all our costs against that. It's slightly easier in some respects for us because we've no family labour involved, so every hour of work that we do is costed out. And we're targeting across all the enterprises on the estate a 15 to 20% net return. And the way we think about that is we've got some high risk, high reward businesses in terms of the wedding business and other sort of public facing areas. And then we've got the engine room of the estate, which is the farming business. But that element of it has to be profitable because it's in such large numbers that if we start making a loss per head or per kilo, it soon multiplies up. And then because we do that, we sort of go into the finer details of everything. So I had a look back at the cattle that we finished in the Q4 of 2023 and looked at it from a suckler cattle and a dairy cow perspective. Because we all know suckler calves are better, right? They're better finishing stock on. And that's why you've got a £200 a head premium when you're buying calves. So we looked at it and we said, what are the figures behind that? So deadweight wise, when we killed things, the suckler bred stuff, 317 kilos, the dairy bred stuff, 304. So we target a 300 kilo carcass, that's fine. Price was roughly the same per kilo and per head. The live weights, the suckler cattle, the suckler bred finishing cattle that we have, we pull at about 550 kilos live. Anything that's dairy bred, you've got a bit more bone, a bit more frame in there. So they average about 575, quite a lot of them pushing up into 600 and past that. Obviously, as I said, we all know suckler cows are better. We got a 57% killing out from suckler bred stuff and 53 on the dairy. 19 months average dead suckler cattle, 21 dairy. This is all saying, suckler cows are miles better. We got down to what's the margin. Margin per head, £1,050 suckler bred, 986 for dairy bred. There we are, sucklers win, away we go. But then when we factor back into that, your average purchase price for the suckler breds. Yeah. So I say purchase price, they're homebred cattle in there as well, but we will do a sale from the breeding enterprise into the store finishing enterprise. So we're buying suckler bred cattle at £1,000 a head, buying the dairy bred at £800 a head. That £64 difference in gross margin when you account for what you've bought in is completely wiped out.
Makes all the difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So you've led beautifully into my next question there, because I will ask you for questions in a minute, just hang on. But there's been quite a bit of chat on the other panels today about scaling up. The future of the industry is to scale up, get more cows. Now, if you've got an enterprise that isn't making any money, what do you want to scale it up for? Andrew, come on.
I think you've answered that question yourself, but yeah, we're all very passionate and love farming and love cows, don't we, or beef cattle, but you're absolutely right. I think and I'm generalising here, but if your enterprise is not making money now and you scale up, you're just going to make the loss even bigger. Because usually scaling up on a farm means spending more money. So it's about reaching that sweet spot, which might actually even be scaling back slightly. And I'm not one of these that says, we are pushing cow numbers up ever so slightly again. But it's about how to make that system more efficient and make it profitable, because it's a very emotional industry, agriculture, which we can all, we all know it's the home as well as the business. But it is a business. And just because we want to produce beef cattle and we've got it doesn't mean we have a right for it to be profitable. And we've seen in many sectors that scaling up doesn't help the situation, because you just bang a load more overheads in it and a load more direct costs. So no, I think it's like Ruari was saying, and I was saying earlier, try and maximise what your farm can do without spending too much money on it.
And Claire, you've got quite a smaller suckler herd in the grand scheme of things, but you've obviously done those calculations for your farm to figure out where that sweet spot is. I'm sure you could carry more cattle on your farm, but you'd be buying a lot more in, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there is. It's not me that coined this phrase, but there is such a thing as a maximum sustainable output on your farm, and no, it's not the same number for every farm, because everyone knows every farm is different. I think we're still working towards our maximal sustainable, I can't say it now, MSO.
That one, yeah.
That one. We're still working towards it. I think we're about 0.4 livestock units per hectare. We're aiming for about 0.6. We feel as though that's the number that we can reach. And we wouldn't ever want to push the farm anymore, because, as Andrew said, we might have to then start buying in inputs, and the less you're buying in, the more likely you're going to make a profit.
Yeah. Okay. Have we got any questions from the audience before I carry on? No? Okay. So let's talk about preparing then for loss of subsidies. They're going. We've known they're going for quite some time. What changes have you made, Andrew, to the cattle that you're running, and what changes have you seen people make that you work with? What positive things are they doing to make that an easier transition?
The answer to the first one, back at home, where I must admit I'm not the brains behind the operation on our farm. My best pal Jeff is the runner. But when we realised basic payment was, we didn't realise, we were told many years ago that it was going, and long before the SFI got into gear, we felt we had to try and minimise costs. And ours is a forage-based farm. We produce all the feed on farm, and it was how can we reduce those costs. So over the last 4-5 years, we've probably invested a lot of money, but it's working now, into herbal layers latterly, but just direct drilling a lot of clover into the silage ground to reduce the fertiliser bill. And it wasn't anything about being organic at that point. It was trying to produce quality silage at a very cheap, as cheap as possible. That has now worked, because last summer we produced all the silage without any fertiliser. The type of cow we were feeding the cows on silage out the pit with the diet feeder. It all felt a bit expensive and a bit far too good for lean cows, which need a bread and water diet. Our cows, we spend more time in the winter trying to get them to thin down a bit before calving rather than put flesh on them. So we now feed 170 cows in about 20 minutes with some. We're very good at making bad quality hay, which is perfect for them. and one loader and a unroller, so we massively cut the costs there. So I think it's about doing what we're doing, but better. And then latterly, I think the SFI on our type of farm, which is marginal, with a little bit of land down at the river we can plough, the SFI has come into its own, and actually a lot of what we were doing anyways you can now get paid for doing, and it works well on a hill suckler cow system. I won't get into upland, the true uplands. With my other hat on it in the accountancy world, I think you could generalise and say that you could almost split the farming industry into thirds. There's a third at the bottom, I'm afraid to say, still sort of burying their head in the sand and hopes it all goes away, or the commodity prices will lift. Now, I would love to see all the commodity prices lift, but we're not going to run our business on it, and I wouldn't advise a client, because if they don't, they don't. There's some in the middle know they've got to do something, and are starting to look at SFIs, reducing costs, other income streams. What the top ones are the ones that are most addressed. Looking at producing what the market wants, looking at margin rather than sales value, not doing what they've always done just because they've always done it, and cutting out costs that they aren't getting a return from. And I think that's easier said than done, but it's not. You can cut lots of costs, but you'll lose income from it. If you cut out too many vets bills or medicine bills, your performance will suffer. It's trying to get the balance right. And the most critical one, and I said it before, is not spend too much on shiny metal, because it looks great and it's great fun to drive, but it doesn't make a penny. And you can distinctly tell the ones with too much gear and the ones that have got just what they need.
Brilliant, thanks Andrew. Claire, talk us through, I suppose, your system. It's maybe irrespective of the loss of subsidies, yours, it's the way you've sort of done it, isn't it?
Yeah, so we quite early on broke down all our enterprises and saw which ones were making a profit, and then worked from there. We could see that the cattle we started out with just 4 cows, but we could see quite quickly that we were going to make a profit off the cows and not off the sheep, which is why we sold the sheep. We were told that if we wanted to keep cattle on Gowbarrow, we would have to build a big shed to house them. We were told there's no way you can outwinter your cattle, it's too wet. But there's no way that we were going to get any kind of return on building a massive shed. So we had to figure out a way to outwinter them. And so we just thought about how the management of the land was going to be as such that we could keep them out winter, not destroy the land, and keep them on 100% grass. And that's how we've done it. And it just happens to be that we wanted to, our outwintering land is a wood pasture area. And the areas that we have during the summer is we mob graze over our meadows. And wood pasture and conversion to species-rich grassland work really well in the higher tier stewardship. So we haven't designed our farming system to fit with the stewardship. We've designed a farming system that runs a profitable beef enterprise. It happens to be that we get paid quite well under environmental stewardship for that as well.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to come to an event on bale grazing at your place recently, and it was just unbelievable after the winter that we've had, how good your land looked. Your cows are absolutely spot on. It was, it's really working for you, isn't it? Yeah,
it has. We have gone through our herd quite meticulously to make sure that we have got the right cow to outwinter on our farm as well. So we love our shorthorn. They're absolutely brilliant. We've been quite brutal when it comes to culling. If a cow can't make it through winter outside, she's a cull cow. And often on their following lines, we don't cull straight away, but we keep a good sharp eye on them to make sure we've got the right cow for our system. And we've been focusing on getting heritage genetics of the shorthorns. We're basically breeding a smaller shorthorn because you don't want anything too long legs, they're too heavy.
Yeah. Other breeds are available, by the way. Ruari, go on. Tell us what changes you've made.
We have got, or tried to get, more comfortable with making mistakes and accepting those mistakes, understanding why something's gone wrong or has not worked, and then folding that into our knowledge bank and moving on again. We very quickly realised if we carried on doing the same as what we had been doing, the business wouldn't be financially viable and just wouldn't be there anymore. So I think in farming we're all, I know I talk to friends of mine and I still have to stop myself doing it. So pick up the phone, how are you getting on? Yeah, it's grand. Speak to people now, how are you getting on? Oh yeah, fine. Oh, so you've got all your crops drilled, have you? Because we haven't. Oh, well, actually, this, that, and lambing's been a bit crap. We had a storm, losses, etc., etc. And as you start, my friends hate me because I ring them up and I go, oh, what have you got wrong this week then? And like, what's happened? Where, and that's the biggest kind of mind change shift that we've had to try and make as a team and try and get comfortable with. And it's not fun. Nobody likes things going wrong. None of us like thinking, oh yeah, we shouldn't have done that. Like that was a stupid idea. But for us and from my point of view, I'd rather have tried something different and it not work, but I understand why it hasn't worked, and there's always something you can take from that, and it might be that. An example, we've outwintered a lot of cattle this winter. Normally we're on sandy, silty loams, can grow forage crops for fun, and it's easy. You can, graze cattle, they don't leave a mark. Everyone's jealous in the area of what we can do. This year it's been an absolute swamp, and we're paying the price for that now, trying to get crops in the ground, with cattle compaction everywhere, with water sitting, with ruts everywhere. The fields look a mess, and I'm not sure what we've learned yet, but we've learned something. I suppose what we've learned is, even though it's been such a wet, horrible winter, and there were periods where we had outside cattle only doing 0.1 kilos a day, is that when I've gone back and looked at the whole winter period, we budgeted ourselves at 0.7 kilos a day, and we're actually only at 0.58. So we're not that far behind. And actually, we've had 1,000 head of cattle on, and we've had 2 deaths over winter, and that was 2 cattle that had broken their legs. And actually, it's been one of the wettest winters any of us can remember. The conditions have been horrendous, and we've not liked seeing cattle with their backs up in day after day after day of rain, but they've pulled through. They're more resilient than we thought they were. And, going out onto the marsh now with some cracking stock that are as good as we've had before, and we're doing all right. So we're also quite ruthless with our cattle, suckler cows especially, but we have been for 15 years, and we've suckler cows that are 12, 13, 14 years old, still producing a calf every year, still weaning 50% of their body weight, and they're the cows we want to breed from. And we've made a mistake with a bull last year, and we're not keeping any of his daughters, but we've learned, and we'll move on, and we'll keep pushing and keep trying.
If you're not failing, you're not trying, Ruari.
Go on.
So you've both spoken about being fairly ruthless, and you have as well, Andrew, with your cattle. Are we guilty over here of loving our cows too much instead of loving what they can actually do for us in terms of soil health, grazing, environmental management? Do we mollycoddle them?
Yes.
Excellent.
I think we do, and especially some breeds require to be mollycoddled, and if you've got the right farm to mollycoddle them and produce the feed for them, and you can see a margin in them, fine. But if you have to mollycoddle them for 7 months of the year in a shed, is it really viable? So yes, we do. We're brutal on the culling. Our bulls are out for 8 weeks total, and if they're not in calf after 8 weeks, that's them gone, even the pedigree ones, because we're not going to carry passengers, unfortunately. So I think, again, and we're all emotional about farming, but it's a business, and if any other business had a machine that was costing too much or wasn't producing the right income, they would get rid of it. So I think it's the emotions we get tied up in, because Grandad did it like that. Businesses all have to change, but I think there's a lot of farmers and we're probably way behind, but are proving that you can still change and produce an awful lot of food and have an awful lot of cattle or sheep or anything else running about. It doesn't mean you've got to stop farming as we know it. Yeah. You've just got to adapt your mind and ignore what the neighbours say.
Granddads are important, mind. Don't you be dissing granddads, right? Let's come. Has anybody got any questions? Just throw something at me if you have. Sam, who's got the microphone? Carl, your turn today.
Sam doesn't need a mic.
No, he's probably not.
My question is for Andrew, although the others I'm sure would have an answer as well. We've heard a lot of discussion today about businesses and farm businesses. How would you describe the difference between a farm business and a hobby?
You always ask a good question, don't you? Well, I think it's a hobby is something that you enjoy. You do it because you enjoy and you're passionate about it, and you accept that it may cost. If you go and play golf, you go and play golf because you enjoy it. That's the way you want to spend your time, but it's going to cost you whatever money to do it, and you're prepared to invest that. Whereas a business, I think one of the definitions of business is to provide a service or sale that will ultimately result in the profit you want to live on. And I think that's the clearest distinction there is. And if people want a hobby farm because they love a certain breed of cattle or sheep, and I know we're on cattle today, brilliant. And if they've got other income to invest in that, that's absolutely fine by that. It's just the same as me going to play golf if I want to. But if you're purporting to be in business, you have to make a profit. Otherwise, well, it'll all crash down one day if you don't make a profit very quickly.
Either of you have any more? Yeah, go on, Ruari.
I would say the most successful business people have found a way to make their hobby their job. So if you enjoy what you do and you're really passionate about it, you will be good at it. Which comes back to my point before of too many people are trying to fit what they want to do onto a farm that doesn't support it. So if you can find what is your unfair advantage within your farm or your business or your mindset, or I'm a big believer in it's people that make a business and it's relationships that make people work. So you don't have to be the most financially or technically minded person in the world. You can just be a really good operator. And as long as you've got the relationships around the business of, got a really good accountant that we know and trust, we've got a really good vet, a really good nutritionist, even if it's just, I've got the guys I was at Young Farmers with that we just throw stupid ideas off the wall at each other, and the best business decisions I've taken have come through conversations with professional people, but I would count them as friends. And that I think is the distinction.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks, Ruari. Anybody else before we carry on? No, right. I'm just going to come back then to product, the beef that we're all producing. So, Ruari, you very tongue-in-cheek said sucklers are better than dairy cross animals. Now, we're all suckler fans here, I think. But are they better than dairy cross in terms of the product? And is that a problem for the overall industry? Because if we look at the dairy cross animals that are coming through, the control over the genetics behind them, the systems that they're going through, it's all very controlled, and they are a uniform bunch, which you don't often see in sucklers because of the different sires, the different breeds, the different everything else. And I should have done my research before I started with this, but the last time I saw a figure for percentage stock in spec, it was around 60%, and that's beef and lamb, but still, it's fairly crap, isn't it? So, what is it a problem? Is it, dairy beef are fairly symmetrical, fairly well in spec? What do we do within the suckler industry to try and create that product that our consumer wants? And I don't like to say compete, but bring the whole industry together in terms of a really high quality in-spec product. Well, Claire, you're a direct selling. So tell us about how have you managed that with your animals?
All I can say really is that because we get that face-to-face feedback from our customers, the amount of times we get customers come back to say, that is the best steak I've ever eaten, is, well, I couldn't count how many times. And even like the not just the steak, they're continuously saying to me, yours is the best beef I've ever had. I don't eat any of the beef, so I couldn't compare it. But there's also, I think, having that conversation, and I'm regularly updating customers with what's happening, how we're managing the animals, that story behind it really helps as well. They understand how we're managing it, and the fact that we're managing our cattle for the environment and understanding that that is how the beef is almost a surplus to it, that helps a lot, because there's so much negativity around beef in general at the moment, that if you want to persuade people to keep eating beef, they've got to understand that the cattle, they're not just for produce, well, certainly for us, they're not just there to produce beef. And they also understand that not every animal is identical. And you said about consistency, but for us, that almost doesn't matter. Customers are happy to get a slightly different product every time, and they've always explained why that is the case. And that seems absolutely fine. We've never got negative feedback on what we've
It's the
sold.
story that sells your product. So for Ruari then and Andrew, you're not direct selling, are you? No. So what about you guys then? Do you feel like there's enough feedback coming back to help you with that consistency? How do you manage that?
Potentially controversially again, we sell everything dead weight. I won't go to a market purely because I don't get the kill sheets back and I don't get that feedback. And it shouldn't be difficult for a market to speak to the people that are killing cattle and get that information back to us. We've got traceability on an individual per head basis. We should be able to use that. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. I don't think there's a material difference between the two. Or rather, if you learn what they specifically need to finish them to the spec you're aiming for. So we will feed our suckler bred cattle differently to how we feed our dairy bred cattle, and that's through trial and error. That's through feedback from the kill sheets. That's from looking back at the information we've got, and I've learned over the years that to vary starch and protein levels and do various different things to get the quality of finish that I want out of them. And I've not done it, I would like to, but I dare say we could do a blind taste test with 2 steaks from suckler bred and a dairy bred on our farm, and they'd probably taste near enough identical. And that's the feedback we get from the abattoirs we work with. We've got suckler and dairy bred cattle going into M&S schemes, the whole gamut of highest quality markers, a lot of which is just marketing anyway. But I've been lucky enough in the past to be involved in eating quality trials and different tests and bits and pieces, and there is far more influence to the diet and the system that it was reared in than there is a genetic component from what I've seen. So.
Yeah, Andrew, what are your thoughts? Are we guilty of producing a product and then just expecting a market for it?
Yes. I think I'll be controversial. I love cattle of any type, and so does my mate. But first of all, we have suckler cows producing suckler beef because that's what suits our farm. We can grow a little bit of grain just to do what we want. We have to produce something that can live off forage we can produce. So dairy bred beef isn't for us because of that reason, not because we don't like it. Whether it's an inferior product or not, you could argue all day. But it's doing what your farm will do. We sell everything dead weight. It goes to Scot beef. The only time we sell anything at the mart is if the sheds are a bit tight in late winter, and we'll put some in the store at Hexham. But being controversial, ours are Ling Angus crosses, and they don't have, pardon the French, fat arses, which is one of my bugbears in life. They are proper frames, and we are aiming to get them as cheaply as we can to the right weight, the right spec to hit the grid in Scot beef, because we get paid for them. And I'm sitting in a mart, and you can shoot me if you want, but You know, every photo I see ready for the store sale in Hexham on a Friday is them all standing in a feed trough with their asses out showing. And the best cuts are down out the frame. It's about frame. So I get a bit passionate about it but I think produce what beef your farm will produce as cost efficiently as possible. And we also have to remember that there's only a certain part of our population can afford the real good quality cuts of suckler beef. And there's an awful lot of beef disappears into mince, into ready-made meals, etc. Hence why cull cows are such a good trade. So to me, there's a place for both of them. Just do the one that works best for you.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get thrown out of here now.
It's happened before.
Right. Any questions? No? Okay. One more question on the doing before we go on to the mindset. Ruari, before we had a briefing the other week about this panel session, and you mentioned about collaborating and muck for straw deals. Collaboration is something that every other industry thrives on. Do we do it enough in the farming? This is a question to all of you. And could it be of benefit? And if so, how do you see that working? How do you think it could benefit the suckler farmers, herds, not industry? One. Anybody got any thoughts? Ruari, you've got a muck for straw deal, so just talk us through that. Why have you got that? And what benefit is it to your business?
Yeah, well, we're quite lucky in some respects because we're quite a diverse business anyway. And I enjoy complexity. So I quite like having... I don't view it as we've got an arable business over there, we've got a finishing business here, and we've got a suckler cow business here. I view it as, well, this is the farm, this is everything we do, and each element of it ties in. We, again, are quite lucky that we're in an area with a lot of dairy farms around us that don't necessarily have enough land for the amount of headage that they've got. We don't have enough sheds for the amount of ground that we've got and the weather conditions if we wanted to run more cattle. So we sell a lot of crops off farm to neighbouring dairy farmers, but we make sure we get the muck back. If you go back through the history of the estate and the business that we have now, the only reason cattle are here in the first place is because we're on sandy, silty loams and we need to get organic matter back into the ground. We went through the same story as a lot of arable farmers have gone through. Kept ploughing, kept using inorganic fertilisers. This is great, we're getting fantastic crops, making money hand over fist, and then the wheels all fell off. Organic matters are down at 1% and 2%. The fertility's gone out of the soil and we're a dust bowl. So about 20 years ago, cattle came into the system, started moving into the rotations, putting more muck back on, and we have long-standing relationships, business relationships. We contract grow a lot of maize for dairy farmers. Every ton of maize they take away, they bring back a ton of muck, and that helps us because we have a sale option for the crops that we grow. We fully cost everything back through the finishing enterprise that we do, and so a dairy farmer can afford to pay more per ton for maize than we can afford to put through the fat cattle. That's fine, we'll sell the maize, bring the muck back in. We can spend 3/4 of the money we've got from the maize buying something else back in to feed the cattle and still do as good a job, and we've still got some money left over. And we've got the fertility going back into the soil. We don't buy any P and K in out of the bag for the crops. It all comes from the muck. The only inorganic fertiliser we use is a little bit of nitrogen with some sulphur in it, and that it's not really a collaboration. It is, but it's advantageous to our business anyway.
Yeah.
So it's been open and flexible year to year. If we do exactly the same thing this year as we did last year, we've done something wrong, because you're not telling me the weather conditions and the wider business markets are exactly the same year on year.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's hard work. That takes effort. That takes thought. And yeah, I do think there's a lot of farm businesses that are missing out for not talking to their neighbours a bit more, or the guy one county over, or the girl up the road who's, doing a bit of direct selling and might need an odd extra piece now and then.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, you've spoken a lot about not buying shiny kit. Why don't people share kit more?
because they all want their own. It's a natural thing, and I might need it. We might both want to use it on the same day or whatever. Farmers are notoriously bad at collaborating, if I could even say it. You know, they're both retired, but I looked after two brothers that had two sizable farms next door to each other, and they both had every bit of kit.
Yeah.
And a number of times I said, why don't you just have one bit? And that was two brothers. Just on we don't, I suppose on our farm, we don't collaborate. We do, once our silage ground with all the clovers in gets too wet for the young cattle to graze without damaging it, we do collaborate with one of our friends, and he brings a mob of store lambs. And he just puts them on, and they tidy up all the fields. He gets some cheap grazing, and we get the fields tidied up a bit of fertility. So there is collaboration. And another thought, we live right in the centre of, just along from Haltwhistle, which is allegedly the centre of Britain. And the main road goes past the bottom of the farm, and the wagon loads of straw that go past all winter to Cumbria and southwest Scotland. And I get some of it has to go to dairy farms, but we once tried a few years ago, a gang of us, to get the cattle to go at the straw for the winter rather than the other. So you need less sheds, less fodder in the west, and you take the muck to where the straw is and stop hauling it about. But the infrastructure's gone, the people that want to look after cattle's gone. There's a lot of barriers to that, but we could make it so much more efficient.
Yeah.
But it does rely us all to work together, which farmers are notoriously, and probably including ourselves, bad at.
Yeah. Claire, any thoughts from you? Do you collaborate with anybody on anything?
I might do a nice segue to your mindset.
Oh, go on.
When we started doing we changed 2019. No one else in our immediate vicinity was doing it, and all the naysayers were going, look around you, no one's doing it. So we spent a bit of time looking further afield at who was. And a lot of the time it's collaborating on ideas, sharing what we're doing, what other people are doing. I mean, we spent a lot of time visiting other farmers, and it was never a farmer saying, you do what we're doing, and we never say everyone should do what we're doing, but it's getting ideas, having a thought that might work on my farm. I'll give it a shot. Coming back to what Ruari was saying is, if you try stuff, if it fails, it doesn't matter. You just learn from it, as long as you learn the right lesson. I think collaborating more with what we're doing, ideas.
Yeah. Everybody fails, don't they? And anybody that says
it's sharing those failures as well.
Exactly.
And learning from it, and helping other people learn from it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Questions? Oh, one here from Michael.
You mentioned, Andrew, scale's hard to get, and it's not always worthwhile scaling up, and it's sometimes counterproductive to cut out all your costs. So are you having talks with people who are going to have to get more off-farm income? You and your colleagues, is it getting to the point where a workable-sized farm is just much bigger than it used to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the conversation that's been happening for a number of years is, do you just understand what your business looks like without basic payment? And as I controversially said before, for a long time somebody thought there would be there'd be a magic wand came and farmers would be all right. And so that was the first thing. And obviously if you take out the basic payment, there's some fairly hefty holes in farm accounts. So something has to be done to make it viable. I think, yeah, you're right. More farms, a lot of smaller farms, there won't be sufficient income to run a family out of, and they will have to bring income from somewhere else. Now, diversification is a much used word, but diversification could be as simple as somebody going and getting a part-time job off farm and doing the farming at night or something. We were just having this debate in the office the other day. I think your small farm where it's maybe part-time with other income of some form will be all right. Your large-scale agri-business which many of them aren't factory farms, as seems to be bandied about these days, but are just family farms, but big, will be all right because they're not totally reliant on basic payment. It's those middle ground 400-500 acre farms, especially in the red meat, our sector, the beef, where it just looks as though it would be difficult to get it to stack up. And I have most concern about that sort of size of farm. It might be different if you're dairy or intensive red meat, pork and things, but beef, it's those ones I think we'll see. They'll either go less intensive and get some other income, or they'll have to scale up or let somebody else scale up on their land, I think.
Just on the subject of diversification or second income streams, there seems to be a bit of a stigma around that. Should there be? What's the shame in having a second income stream off farm?
It's a good question. I think the stigma, personally, I think the stigma is more about the word, that diversification has become this answer to everything. It probably has been for the last 10 years. And as I've just said, diversification can be as simple in my world as going to get a second part-time job or whatever. You know, many farms are diversified already. I think you've always got to go into diversification with your eyes wide open, and there's too many times diversification has been something on the side of the farm. And I think if you're going to have a diversification, you've got to run it equally as hard as a business and as focused as the farm. And if you're a farmer and you don't like dealing with the public, don't go into diversification that requires the public. Or if you're whatever you might be. And most diversification takes a lot of money, if we're honest. So I think the stigmas around the word, it's a bit like succession as well at the moment. We'll not go on to that one today, but succession's almost got a stigma around it because everyone's using it. It's all you should be thinking about. Keep it simple with diversification.
Yeah. Real, thank you. Right, last. Oh God, we've only got 1 minute to talk about mindset. Quick. Right, mindset. We've actually spoken about it a lot. Give me your top. What you think are the biggest blockers in terms of mindset within that hold the whole industry back, not just in Sucklers, the whole industry. What do we need to shift in mindset? Claire, I'm going to ask you first.
I quite like the phrase, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're always going to be right. And going on to that frame of mind of, I think I can do this, and if you think there are blockers, you go, why? And you keep asking that question, why, until you realise that you probably can. And it is that giving something a go. If it fails, it doesn't matter. You've learned from it. I mean, we've had plenty of failures. We've learned from it, and we've changed. And you just realise that your business is never going to be fixed. It's always going to be evolving, and you kind of have to always evolve because you're a business, and you can't just stagnate as a business.
But what about if your neighbour sees you fail? Then what happens?
If your neighbour sees you fail, just, I don't know, don't care what...
Wave at them.
Yeah, don't care what your neighbour thinks. I mean, it's your business. You can run it as you like. It's not your neighbour's business. They've got their own business to worry about.
Okay. Ruari?
I think it's not just in our industry, it's in any industry. It's that fear of change and that fear of the unknown. And there's such a weight of expectation and tradition in and around farming businesses that not only have you got fear of the unknown, fear of change, but you've got fear of peer pressure or fear of what's mum and dad going to say, or certainly people that are in multi-generational businesses, there's that weight of expectation of you don't want to be the generation that lets the farm fail. And I think it's going back to what I said before, it's getting comfortable with making mistakes, but equally not taking foolish risks. So we will try and do something new each year, and we will try and learn from our mistakes, but we equally don't change everything all at once, because then we can't measure it and work out, was it a success or failure. And before we try anything, we always set, okay, what are the parameters for success and what are the parameters for failure? And the parameters for success might be we only lose a little bit of money, or we break even, and don't let perfection be the enemy of good. Like if it's good enough, roll on. Like you can get something 80% of the way there and then switch on to something else. You know, like I'd rather get 100% improvement by 101% than 100%.
Okay, Andrew.
I would echo what the others have said. We've got to stop being so resistant to change. Treat change as an opportunity rather than a threat. And I think simply just focus on what you can control and influence. If you can't control and influence something, don't worry about it. And the clearest example of that is me in our own business cannot control what price the supermarkets will pay us for our beef. But we can control and influence the product we send them to make sure it's what they want. That's where your efforts should be focused.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, any final questions before we wrap it up? Okay, so yeah, just to stick my 10 pence in at the end, it's very much about mindset in my opinion, and I think everything that our panellists have said has been absolutely spot on, but I would just remind people to lean on each other. We're all in it together. Now, I don't mean just the people farming, the whole industry are in it together, and we should all be supporting each other. There's an awful lot that you can learn from each other, from if you're honest and you speak to each other. That's the main thing, isn't it? We need to get rid of this stigma of trying to keep our cards so close to our chest, because I think we could probably do a lot better. But I would just love to thank all three of you. You've put forward some brilliant points. Thank you for being so open and honest. And I would just like you all to show your appreciation, please.